Jasmine Washington stands defiant on the tarmac, arms spread wide, forcing a Boeing 747 to brake violently. Security personnel surround her, guns drawn. Behind her, 50 passengers of color, forming a human chain. Today, she announces into her phone live streaming to millions, "We make history." Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and resistance, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. Now let's rewind to see how this extraordinary moment came to be. Dr. Jasmine Washington adjusted her navy blazer as she settled into Seat 3A of United Airlines Flight 1382. The first-class cabin smelled of fresh upholstery and expensive cologne. At 38, Jasmine had earned her place among the elite travelers. A renowned neurosurgeon flying from Atlanta to Boston to perform a life-saving procedure on the governor's 17-year-old son. "Excuse me," Jasmine raised her hand politely as flight attendant Heather Bailey passed by with a tray of champagne flutes. The slender blonde woman continued down the aisle, distributing drinks to the white passengers while seemingly oblivious to Jasmine's request. Perhaps she didn't see me, Jasmine thought, giving the benefit of doubt. She waited until Bailey completed her round before trying again. "Excuse me, I'd like some water please," Jasmine said, making direct eye contact this time. "I'll be with you shortly," Bailey responded without slowing her pace. 20 minutes passed. The flight attendant had served every passenger in first class except Jasmine. The pattern became impossible to ignore when a white businessman in Seat 2C arrived late, and Bailey immediately attended to him with a warm smile and complimentary drink. "Is there a reason I haven't been offered any service?" Jasmine finally asked when Bailey passed by again. The flight attendant's smile tightened. "We're very busy preparing for takeoff. If you could be patient like everyone else, that would be appreciated." From across the aisle, Raymond Hoffman, a middle-aged white executive in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. "The crew is doing their best. No need for an attitude." Jasmine felt her cheeks burn. She hadn't raised her voice or shown any sign of impatience, yet was being characterized as difficult. It was a familiar experience, being labeled as aggressive for simply asking for equal treatment. The cabin speakers crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your Captain Jordan Pierce speaking. We're experiencing a slight technical delay. We should be underway in about 20 minutes. Flight attendants, please stand by." As the passengers settled in for the wait, Jasmine overheard a conversation near the galley. Flight attendants Bailey and Tiffany Wilson were speaking in hushed tones, but their words carried in the quiet cabin. "Always the same with these uppity passengers," Wilson muttered. "Think they belong up here with us. I know. First class doesn't mean what it used to," Bailey replied with a snicker. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten. She discreetly reached for her phone and began recording the interaction, careful to keep the device partially hidden in her lap. When the drink cart finally came around again, Bailey approached Jasmine's seat with visible reluctance. As she extended a cup of coffee, her hand slipped, spilling the hot liquid across Jasmine's lap. "Oh. I'm so sorry," Bailey said, her tone lacking any genuine remorse. Jasmine jumped up as the scalding liquid soaked through her pants. "Could I please have some napkins?" Bailey moved on to the next passenger without responding. The burning sensation intensified on Jasmine's skin, but her requests for assistance continued to be ignored. "Ma'am, you're making a scene," said Bradley Thompson from the row behind her. The white passenger's voice carried an authoritative tone that implied Jasmine was the problem, not the flight attendant who had spilled hot coffee on her. Before Jasmine could respond, a stern-faced man in plain clothes approached her seat. "Ma'am, I'm Air Marshal Calvin Taylor. I need you to come with me." "For what reason?" Jasmine asked, genuinely confused. "We've received complaints about disruptive behavior," said a uniformed security officer who identified himself as Blake Davis. "We need to ask you some questions before the flight can depart." This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. I'm a doctor traveling for an emergency surgery, Jasmine explained, showing her medical credentials. The marshal's expression remained impassive. Please come with us quietly, or we'll be forced to remove you. When Jasmine attempted to gather her belongings, Davis grabbed her arm. That won't be necessary. Your items will be secured. The humiliation of being physically escorted down the aisle was compounded by the silence of her fellow passengers. Most avoided eye contact, except for a few black travelers who watched with expressions of pained recognition. As Jasmine was marched through the cabin, she caught a glimpse of Bailey and Wilson exchanging satisfied smirks. The injustice of the situation was overwhelming, but Jasmine maintained her composure even as tears threatened to fall. This isn't right, she heard someone whisper as she passed. But no one stood up. No one intervened. It was as if her dignity wasn't worth the inconvenience of speaking out. By the time they reached the jet bridge, Jasmine's arm was sore from Davis's grip. The air marshal walked ahead while the security officer maintained his hold on her. The professional respect she was accustomed to as a distinguished surgeon had evaporated the moment she questioned unequal treatment. You're hurting me, Jasmine said quietly. Just doing my job, ma'am, Davis replied, tightening his grip. Cooperative passengers don't have these problems. As they entered the terminal, Jasmine noticed the curious and judgmental stares from waiting passengers. Without context, she was just another black woman being removed by security, presumed guilty by default. The holding room was sterile and cold, with harsh fluorescent lighting that gave everything a sickly pallor. Security officers Davis and Monroe stood by the door while Jasmine sat rigidly in a metal chair, her professional demeanor masking the storm building within her. I need to make a call, Jasmine said, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. I'm scheduled to perform emergency surgery this afternoon. A young man's life depends on it. Officer Monroe shrugged. Make it quick. With trembling fingers, Jasmine dialed Boston Memorial Hospital. Dr. Sanchez, her colleague who was prepping the patient, answered immediately. Tom, I've been removed from my flight. They're detaining me for questioning, Jasmine explained, struggling to maintain her professional composure. What? Why? Governor Sullivan is here waiting for updates on his son's condition, Dr. Sanchez replied, alarm evident in his voice. I've been accused of being disruptive, but I was just asking for the same service as other passengers, Jasmine said, conscious of the officers listening to every word. This is unacceptable. We need you here. Jacob's condition is deteriorating faster than anticipated. I know. I'm trying to resolve this. Please tell the governor I'll do everything in my power to get there. As she ended the call, airline manager Nancy Kim entered the room, clipboard in hand and a practiced neutral expression on her face. Dr. Washington, I understand there was an incident on Flight 1382, Kim began, her tone bureaucratic and detached. There was discrimination, not an incident, Jasmine corrected. I was ignored by flight attendants, had coffee spilled on me without assistance, and then was forcibly removed when I asked to be treated with basic courtesy. Kim's expression didn't change. According to our crew, you were exhibiting disruptive behavior that made other passengers uncomfortable. That's absolutely false. I have video evidence, Jasmine said, reaching for her phone. Officer Davis stepped forward and confiscated the device. We'll need to review any recordings for security purposes. My medical equipment is in my checked luggage, Jasmine explained to Kim, trying a different approach. I'm traveling to Boston to perform life-saving surgery. Every minute of delay puts my patient at greater risk. Your luggage has already been loaded onto the aircraft, Kim replied, unmoved. It will continue to Boston as scheduled. So my belongings can fly but I can't. Jasmine asked incredulously. Through the glass walls of the holding room, Jasmine noticed a disturbing pattern unfolding at the security checkpoint. Several passengers of color were being pulled aside for random, additional screening, while white travelers passed through with minimal scrutiny. At gate 22, an elderly black man with a cane was surrounded by TSA agents. At gate 26, a Muslim family was having their belongings searched item by item. The systematic nature of the discrimination was suddenly crystal clear. It wasn't just her flight, it was the entire airport operation. The realization triggered a vivid memory from Jasmine's childhood. She was 7 years old, sitting on her father's lap as he explained why the police had pulled him over for the third time that month. "Jasmine," he had said, his voice gentle but firm, "there will be times when people treat you unfairly because of the color of your skin. In those moments, you have a choice. You can accept it quietly to stay safe, or you can stand up not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Either choice takes courage." The memory faded as Officer Bruce Wilson entered the room, chuckling as he spoke to Davis. "Got our quota for the day. Security supervisor's happy." Jasmine felt something shift inside her, a transformation from frustrated passenger to determined activist. The injustice wasn't just about her anymore, it was about a system designed to humiliate and control people of color under the guise of security. "I need to use the restroom," she stated, her decision made. Officer Monroe nodded toward a door in the corner. "Don't try anything." In the small bathroom, Jasmine examined her options. The window was too small for escape, but her medical credentials were still in her pocket. The plastic ID card with "physician" in bold letters and hospital access clearance might be her ticket out of detention. When she emerged, she announced, "I've been called for a medical emergency in the terminal. As a doctor, I'm legally obligated to respond." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared for this assertion of authority. "We haven't been notified of any emergency," Davis said hesitantly. "That's because it just happened. Every second of delay could cost a life," Jasmine replied with the authoritative tone she used in the operating room. She held up her medical credentials. "You can accompany me if you wish, but I must go now." The confidence in her voice created just enough doubt for the officers to hesitate. Using that moment of uncertainty, Jasmine strode purposefully toward the door. Neither officer physically stopped her, though Davis called after her, "Ma'am, you're not authorized to leave." In the crowded terminal, Jasmine quickly disappeared among the travelers. She found a quiet corner near a service corridor and pulled out her spare phone from an inner pocket of her blazer. The officers had taken her primary device but had failed to ask if she carried another. She texted her sister Alicia with the video attachment, "Removed from UA 1382 for being black in first class. Discrimination widespread at Atlanta airport. Post this everywhere. I'm going to take action." The service corridor was dimly lit and smelled of industrial cleaner. Jasmine moved quickly, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. She needed allies, evidence, and a plan, in that order. "You shouldn't be back here," a deep voice called out. Jasmine turned to see a middle-aged black man in a gray janitorial uniform. His name tag read, Darnell Robinson. "I'm sorry, I'm trying to avoid security," Jasmine explained honestly. "I was removed from my flight because of racial discrimination." Darnell's expression softened from suspicion to understanding. "United Airlines, right? Let me guess, you were in first class. How did you know?" "Because it happens every day," Darnell said, leaning on his mop. "I've worked here for 15 years. Seen it all. United's the worst offender, but not the only one." He glanced around before continuing in a lower voice, "There's a group of us who've been documenting these incidents. Employees, mostly. If you're serious about fighting back, I know people you should meet." 20 minutes later, Jasmine sat in a small break room near the baggage claim area. Around her were 5 airline employees, each with their own story of witnessed discrimination. "I'm Zoe Matthews," said a black flight attendant in a competitor airline's uniform. "I've been keeping records of every incident I've observed for the past 3 years." She slid an employee access card across the table. "This will get you through most doors in the terminal. Terrence Wallace, a burly security guard with graying temples, pulled out his phone. I've got screenshots of internal communications showing targeted harassment directives. Certain flights get flagged for extra scrutiny based on passenger demographics. They don't even try to hide it in the baggage department, added Keith Johnson, a handler with weathered hands and tired eyes. Luggage belonging to passengers with traditionally black or Arabic names gets accidentally mishandled at rates 10 times higher than others. I've been tracking the numbers. Do they use code words? Jasmine asked, thinking of the quota comment she'd overheard. Zoe nodded grimly. They call it maintaining the comfort level. That's code for keeping the ratio of non-white passengers below a certain threshold in premium cabins. There's more, Darnell said. CEO Thomas Reynolds is landing here in about 2 hours for a press conference about their new Customer Service Excellence initiative. The irony would be laughable if it wasn't so harmful. Jasmine processed this information, her mind working through potential strategies. We need to expose this publicly, with irrefutable evidence. Not just my experience, but the pattern. The system is designed to make each incident seem isolated, Terrence explained. When you file a complaint, they treat it as a one-off misunderstanding. Then we show them it's not isolated, Jasmine said decisively. We need to coordinate with passengers who've had similar experiences. Maya Phillips, a young terminal employee with bright eyes and a determined expression, spoke up. I can help with that. I work in communications. I have access to the announcement systems and departure boards. My video is already online, Jasmine told them. My sister posted it with the hashtag United in Racism. Keith checked his phone. It's starting to trend. People are sharing their own stories in the comments. We need to gather those people here, Jasmine said. And find more evidence of systematic discrimination. I can contact passengers from today's flights who were targeted, Zoe offered. Many of them are still in the terminal because of connection delays. And I'll reach out to my network of employee witnesses, Darnell added. As the group dispersed to execute their roles, Jasmine felt a sense of purpose crystallizing. What had begun as personal humiliation was transforming into a movement. The alliance forming around her represented years of suppressed frustration and documented abuse, finally finding an outlet for action. Dar. Washington, Terrence called as they prepared to leave the break room. You should know that once we do this, there's no going back. The company will come after everyone involved. Jasmine thought of her patient waiting in Boston, of her career built over decades of sacrifice, of her father's words about making difficult choices. Some things are more important than personal consequences, she replied. This is bigger than me now. As they moved through the terminal, each alliance member began their assigned task. Zoe discreetly approached passengers who had been subjected to random screenings. Keith gathered his fellow baggage handlers to retrieve evidence of discriminatory practices. Maya accessed the communications system to prepare for their coordinated message. Jasmine checked her phone and saw her sister's text, video at 50,000 views and climbing. Civil rights groups are reaching out. What's your next move? We're shutting it down, Jasmine texted back. All of it. In the executive offices of United Airlines Atlanta Operations Center, chaos erupted as monitors displayed the rapidly spreading social media firestorm. The hashtag United in Racism had jumped to the top trending spot nationwide, with Jasmine's video surpassing 100,000 views in under an hour. Get me every detail on this Washington woman, barked Harold Simmons, the regional director, to a room full of increasingly anxious staff. And someone call Reynolds before his plane lands. This situation needs to be contained immediately. Public Relations Director Amanda Carter scrolled through her tablet, her expression grim. Sir, we have a significant problem. People are sharing their own discrimination experiences with our airline. The pattern is undeniable. I don't care about patterns, Simmons snapped. Find a solution. Offer her whatever it takes. First-class tickets for life, cash settlement, anything to make this disappear before Reynolds lands for the press conference. Carter nodded and stepped out to make the call. Within minutes, she returned looking even more concerned. She's not answering her phone, and according to security, she's no longer in the holding room. Somehow, she's in the terminal gathering supporters. How is that possible? Simmons demanded. Find her. Double the security presence throughout the terminal. Down in the main concourse, Jasmine received word of the executive panic through Terrence's security channels. They're offering settlements, he told her with a grim smile. And they've lost track of you. Good, Jasmine replied. That gives us time to build our case. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. I'm at the airport with attorney Brandon Cooper. Where can we meet? Jasmine directed them to the small coffee shop near Gate C-18, which had become their impromptu headquarters. When she arrived, Alicia embraced her tightly. I'm so sorry this happened to you, Alicia whispered. Don't be, Jasmine replied. It's been happening to people every day. I'm just in a position to do something about it. Brandon Cooper, a sharp-dressed attorney with a reputation for high-profile civil rights cases, shook her hand firmly. Dr. Washington, what happened to you is textbook discrimination. But what you're doing now, organizing this response, that's unprecedented. Through the large terminal windows, Jasmine noticed news vans beginning to arrive outside. How did they find out so quickly? Your video has over 200,000 views now, Alicia explained. Every major network is picking it up. Airport Director Victor Hayes approached their group, flanked by security personnel. His forced smile did little to mask his concern. Dr. Washington, I understand you've had an unfortunate experience. Perhaps we could discuss this privately in my office? There's nothing unfortunate about systematic discrimination, Director Hayes, Jasmine replied calmly. And this won't be resolved behind closed doors. Hayes lowered his voice. Please consider the potential disruption to airport operations. Thousands of travelers could be affected. Thousands already are affected, daily, by your discriminatory practices, Jasmine countered. The difference is now people are watching. As if on cue, Maya sent the first pieces of evidence to Jasmine's phone, screenshots from Samantha Green, a customer service representative who had secretly documented racial profiling practices for years. The internal emails showed explicit instructions to gate agents about maintaining passenger profile balance in premium cabins. Director Hayes, Jasmine said, showing him the evidence, you might want to prepare your statement. This isn't going away. Hayes's face paled as he recognized the authentic internal communications. He retreated without another word. The alliance continued to grow as passengers from other flights approached with their own stories. A black executive who had been downgraded despite confirmed first-class reservations. A Middle Eastern family subjected to 3 separate security screenings. An indigenous woman whose carry-on was searched while white passengers with larger bags passed unquestioned. We're creating a record of every incident, Brandon explained to the gathering crowd. Each of you matters. Each experience is evidence. Over the airport's PA system, a familiar announcement began, attention all passengers, this is a security notification. Please report any suspicious behavior to the nearest airport personnel. Jasmine looked at Maya, who gave a subtle nod. The young communications specialist had created a backup plan. Are you still with us on this incredible journey? This story has touched thousands of lives, just like discrimination affects countless travelers every day. If you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of their skin color, comment number 1 below. Hit that like button if you'd stand with Jasmine, and subscribe to hear more stories of courage in the face of injustice. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you fight back against the system or stay quiet to avoid trouble? The next part of this story shows exactly how one woman's courage created a movement that couldn't be stopped. This is a message for all passengers who have experienced discrimination at this airport. Maya's voice came through the speakers, replacing the standard security announcement. Please gather at Concourse B Central Atrium. It's time to be heard. Airport security scrambled to locate the source of the unauthorized announcement, but Maya had routed it through multiple systems, making it nearly impossible to trace. Jasmine stood at the center of the atrium as people began to arrive. First in small groups, then in waves. Some were confused, others curious, but many wore expressions of recognition and determination. These were travelers who had suffered silently, believing their experiences were isolated incidents. "What's happening here?" asked a young mother clutching her child's hand. "We're exposing a pattern of discrimination," Jasmine explained. "And demanding accountability." Attorney Cooper addressed the growing crowd using a portable microphone. "If you've experienced or witnessed discriminatory treatment at this airport, we invite you to share your testimony. We're documenting everything." One by one, passengers stepped forward to recount their experiences. A black businessman described being the only passenger in business class asked to verify his boarding pass 3 separate times. A Muslim student detailed being pulled aside for questioning while her white classmates continued to their gate. An elderly Asian couple explained how they were repeatedly spoken to in loud, condescending tones as if they couldn't understand English, despite being American citizens for over 40 years. Airport Security Chief Warren and a team of officers formed a perimeter around the gathering, unsure how to proceed as news cameras began capturing the impromptu testimonials. "This assembly is unauthorized," Warren announced through a bullhorn. "Please disperse immediately." "This is a peaceful demonstration against civil rights violations," Cooper countered. "These travelers have the right to assemble and speak out against injustice." The standoff intensified when Gregory Miller, United Airlines VP of Operations, pushed through the crowd with a team of airline representatives. "Dr. Washington," Miller called out, his voice carrying a practiced concern that didn't reach his eyes. "We sincerely regret your experience and would like to offer our most heartfelt apology, along with compensation for your inconvenience." Jasmine stepped forward to face him directly. "This isn't about compensation, Mr. Miller. This is about a pattern of discrimination that your airline and this airport have perpetuated for years. These are isolated incidents being mischaracterized," Miller insisted. "We have an exemplary record of customer service across all demographics." "Perhaps you should explain these, then," Jasmine replied, projecting the leaked emails onto a large screen that Maya had accessed. The documents clearly outlined profiling practices, including a scoring system that flagged passengers with culturally specific names for additional screening. Miller's face flushed with anger. "Those documents are proprietary and illegally obtained. Everyone involved in this disruption will face charges for corporate espionage and interfering with airport operations." "You're threatening people for exposing civil rights violations," Cooper interjected. "That's retaliation against whistleblowers, which carries its own legal consequences." As they argued, news crews that had initially gathered outside the airport managed to break through the security cordon, bringing cameras and microphones into the atrium. The confrontation was now being broadcast live across multiple networks. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jasmine addressed the crowd and cameras. "What we're witnessing today isn't new. It's just finally visible. For years, black and brown travelers have been treated as second-class citizens in spaces we have every right to occupy. We've been removed from flights for attitude, when we simply ask for the same service given to white passengers. We've been searched, questioned, and humiliated under the guise of security, when the only threat we pose is to white comfort." The crowd erupted in applause and affirmations as Jasmine continued. "Today, we're saying, enough. We demand transparent anti-discrimination policies with real accountability. We demand independent oversight of security screening practices. We demand respect as paying customers and human beings." As she spoke, airport employees began to join the demonstration. First a few baggage handlers, then customer service representatives, then TSA agents who removed their uniform jackets in solidarity. Director Hayes returned with a security detail, his earlier attempt at diplomacy replaced with stern authority. This has gone far enough. I'm ordering the terminal cleared immediately. On what grounds? Cooper challenged. Security risk, Hayes replied curtly. Anyone remaining will be subject to arrest. Jasmine surveyed the crowd that had formed around her, hundreds of travelers and employees united by shared experiences of discrimination. They looked to her for direction, for a decision that would define this moment. We've tried working within the system, she announced. We've filed complaints that were ignored. We've accepted apologies that led to no real change. Now we take this to a place they can't ignore. She turned to her core allies, Darnell, Zoe, Terrence, Keith, and Maya. Is everyone ready for the next step? Each nodded solemnly, understanding the risk they were taking. We're going to the tarmac, Jasmine announced. CEO Reynolds' plane lands in 30 minutes. He needs to face this reality before he gives his press conference about customer service excellence. A murmur ran through the crowd, accessing the tarmac would cross a line from demonstration to potential federal offense. No one is obligated to join us in this part of the protest, Jasmine clarified. Those who wish to support from here can continue documenting and sharing your stories. To her surprise, over 50 people stepped forward immediately, ready to follow her lead. Then let's make history, she said, leading the group toward the restricted access doors that would take them to the runway. Reynolds Flight UA-189 is approaching from Chicago, scheduled to land on runway 8 in approximately 20 minutes, Terrence reported, checking the secure staff communications on his phone. Jasmine nodded, her heart pounding as she swiped Zoe's access card at the security door. The light blinked green, and the heavy door unlocked with a metallic click. The group moved quickly through the service corridor, following Keith's directions to the least monitored path to the tarmac. Once we're outside, we'll have about 3 minutes before security responds, Keith warned. We need to move fast. Jasmine paused, looking at the determined faces around her. This is the point of no return, she said quietly. What we're about to do carries serious legal consequences. I can't ask anyone to risk their freedom, their careers. You didn't ask, said an elderly black woman who had joined them after sharing her story of being bumped from 3 consecutive flights despite having platinum status. We're choosing to stand with you. Others nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. My father was arrested 17 times during the civil rights movement, said a middle-aged teacher. He always told me that sometimes you have to put your body on the line for justice. Today is my turn. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes at this unexpected solidarity. These weren't activists or protesters by profession, they were ordinary people who had finally reached their breaking point. Stay together, move quickly, and follow my lead, she instructed, pushing open the final door that led outside. The blast of hot air hit them as they emerged onto the tarmac. The vast concrete expanse stretched before them, with aircraft taxiing in the distance. The group moved in formation, heading toward runway 8 where Reynolds' plane would touch down. Within seconds, alarms blared throughout the terminal. Red lights flashed on control towers as security protocols activated. Through his radio, Terrence could hear the chaos unfolding. Breach on tarmac section C. Multiple civilians approaching runway 8R. FAA notification required, potential runway incursion. All approaching aircraft hold position. I repeat, all aircraft hold position. Airport vehicles raced toward them from multiple directions. In the distance, Reynolds' Boeing 737 appeared as a small speck in the sky, beginning its descent. Form the line here, Jasmine directed, stopping at a position visible from both the runway and the terminal. Link arms and stand firm. The protesters formed a human chain across the tarmac, their bodies creating a physical barrier that would force the aircraft to abort its landing. Security vehicles screeched to a halt several yards away, officers emerging with weapons drawn. This is a restricted area. You are in violation of federal law, an officer shouted through a megaphone. Disperse immediately or face arrest. Inside the terminal, passengers pressed against windows to witness the extraordinary scene unfolding on the tarmac. Cell phones recorded from every angle as the human chain stood defiant against approaching security forces. In the control tower, air traffic controllers scrambled to redirect flights. United 189, this is Atlanta Tower. Abort landing, I repeat, abort landing. Runway incursion. Climb and maintain 3,000 feet. Stand by for further instructions. The pilot's confused voice crackled back, Atlanta Tower, United 189. Aborting landing, climbing to 3,000. What's the nature of the incursion? United 189. It's a protest, sir. A human chain across the runway. Please stand by. The aircraft engines roared as the plane pulled up sharply, banking away from the airport in a go-around maneuver. On the tarmac, the protesters cheered as they watched the plane abort its approach. Maya had connected her phone to live stream the entire event, capturing both the protest and the security response. Millions were now watching in real time as armed officers surrounded the peaceful protesters. This is your final warning, the security commander announced. Get on the ground with your hands behind your backs or we will use force. Jasmine stepped forward, still live streaming on her own phone. We will not move until CEO Reynolds agrees to address these documented cases of discrimination and commit to verifiable changes in policy. The standoff intensified as more security personnel arrived, including tactical police units in full riot gear. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the exposed tarmac, with temperatures approaching 95 degrees. Some protesters began showing signs of heat exhaustion. A young woman swayed on her feet, close to fainting. Get her some water, Jasmine called out, but the security officers made no move to help. 2 doctors among the protesters broke formation to attend to those struggling with the heat, using what few resources they had. They're going to wait us out, Terrence murmured to Jasmine. Let the heat do their work for them. Then we need to force a resolution quickly, she replied, turning back to her live stream. To everyone watching, United Airlines CEO Thomas Reynolds is circling above us right now, unwilling to face the discrimination his company practices daily. Share this stream. Call the airline. Show them that the world is watching. The hashtag Runway Revolution joined hashtag United in Racism at the top of trending topics nationwide. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial footage of the human chain across the runway and the grounded flights accumulating on taxiways. The airport had effectively shut down, with no arrivals or departures possible while the standoff continued. The economic impact grew by the minute, putting enormous pressure on authorities to resolve the situation. In the sky above, Reynolds' plane continued to circle, unable to land as the CEO witnessed the unprecedented protest unfolding beneath him. 2 hours into the tarmac standoff, the situation had reached a critical point. Armed security personnel had formed a perimeter around the protesters, while FAA official Lawrence Harrison negotiated via bullhorn. This airfield must be cleared immediately. Harrison shouted. You are in violation of multiple federal statutes and putting lives at risk. Jasmine, now sunburned and dehydrated but resolute, responded through Maya's amplification system. The only risk to lives is the systemic discrimination that strands medical professionals like me when we're traveling to perform life-saving procedures. The heat had taken its toll. Several protesters had reluctantly retreated to receive medical attention, but the core group remained, their determination undiminished despite physical discomfort. From the radio Terrence had secured, they could hear pilots from other aircraft communicating with the tower, Atlanta Tower, this is Delta 2245. We stand with the protesters. Our crew will not cross their picket line. Tower, American 1857 here. We support the demonstration for equal treatment. Happy to remain in holding pattern as long as needed. The unexpected solidarity from airline crews added another layer of complexity to the situation. What had begun as one woman's stand against injustice had evolved into an industry-wide reckoning. Attorney Cooper shuttled between the protest line and the security command post, attempting to negotiate terms for a peaceful resolution. My clients are prepared to clear the runway under the following conditions, he informed Harrison. 1. CEO Reynolds must personally address the documented cases of discrimination. 2. The airline must commit to an independent audit of its practices. 3. No charges will be filed against any of the protesters. Harrison scoffed. They're in no position to make demands. We have tactical teams ready to remove them by force if necessary. Look around you, Cooper replied calmly. Every action here is being live-streamed to millions. Do you really want the world to watch armed officers dragging peaceful protesters across concrete in handcuffs? On the tarmac, conditions worsened as temperatures continued to rise. Medical professionals among the protesters were treating several people for heat exhaustion, using water bottles smuggled through the security line by sympathetic ground crew. Jasmine, Alicia called from the protest line, people can't take much more of this heat. I know, Jasmine replied, her own voice raspy from dehydration. But if we move now, without guarantees, nothing will change. From the radio came urgent chatter, Reynolds is demanding to land at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. He wants to avoid the protest entirely. Jasmine shook her head. He can run, but he can't hide from this reckoning. Reports came in that the White House had been briefed on the situation. The governor of Georgia was considering mobilizing National Guard units to restore airport operations. As the standoff entered its third hour, the human cost became increasingly visible. An elderly man collapsed despite receiving water and shade. A young mother wept as she explained to her children why they needed to stand their ground despite the discomfort. We can't back down, Darnell said, wiping sweat from his brow. Not after coming this far. We won't, Jasmine assured him. But we need to protect our people too. She approached the security line, addressing Harrison directly. We have people suffering from heat exhaustion who need immediate medical attention. Will you allow emergency services through without arrest? Harrison conferred with his team before responding. Medical personnel can approach. Anyone who leaves the protest area will not be permitted to return. Jasmine nodded grimly. Those who need medical attention, please move toward the security line. There's no shame in taking care of your health. Several more protesters reluctantly withdrew, including the elderly man who was now drifting in and out of consciousness. Medical teams rushed forward to provide assistance, while security officers prevented them from rejoining the demonstration. With each departure, the human chain grew thinner, but those who remained stood more determined than ever. They're trying to wait us out, Zoe observed. Then we change tactics, Jasmine decided. She turned to Maya. Can you still broadcast throughout the terminal? Maya nodded, tapping rapidly on her tablet. The system is still under my control, but they're working to lock me out. Send this message to every screen and speaker in the airport. Minutes later, Jasmine's face appeared on departure boards, gate displays, and security monitors throughout the terminal. This is Dr. Jasmine Washington. CEO Reynolds is attempting to land at a military base to avoid addressing racial discrimination at his airline. If you believe in equality, join us. Come to the windows. Make your voices heard. Show him there's nowhere to hide from justice. Inside the terminal, thousands of delayed passengers responded. They pressed against windows, holding up signs hastily made from boarding passes and magazines, United in Racism, and, We Stand with Dr. Washington, and, End Discrimination Now. The visual impact was powerful, the small group on the tarmac now backed by a massive show of support from inside the terminal. News helicopters captured the scene from above. A thin line of protesters surrounded by security, with thousands of supporters visible in the terminal windows behind them. Reynolds' voice finally came through on the radio, "This is getting out of hand. I'll land at Hartsfield and address the situation directly. Have security clear a path." Jasmine exchanged glances with her core allies. "He's coming," she said. "Now we negotiate from strength." By the time Reynolds' helicopter approached from Dobbins Air Reserve Base, the Atlanta airport protest had become global news. International networks interrupted regular programming to show live footage of the standoff, with commentators and experts analyzing the unprecedented demonstration. "We're seeing something historic," said CNN's aviation correspondent. Never in commercial aviation history has a passenger-led protest shut down a major international airport. Social media platforms were overwhelmed with the hashtags #UnitedInRacism and #RunwayRevolution, as travelers around the world began sharing their own experiences of discrimination. Sympathy demonstrations erupted at airports in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and internationally in London, Paris, and Dubai. "Dr. Washington has ignited a movement that was long overdue," observed a civil rights leader on MSNBC. "What we're witnessing is decades of accumulated injustice finally finding its voice." Inside United Airlines corporate headquarters, the situation had reached crisis level. The company's stock had plummeted nearly 15% in a single trading session as investors panicked over the reputational damage and potential lawsuits. "The board is convening an emergency meeting," an executive assistant informed Reynolds via satellite phone as his helicopter circled toward the airport. "Several major shareholders are demanding your resignation effective immediately." Reynolds clutched the armrest, his knuckles white. The career he had built over 30 years was unraveling in real time, broadcast to billions of viewers worldwide. On the tarmac, Jasmine and her remaining allies stood firm despite physical exhaustion. The protest had been underway for nearly 6 hours, with the Georgia summer sun beating down mercilessly for most of that time. "Corporate sponsors are starting to pull their partnerships," Alicia reported, reading from her phone. American Express just announced they're re-evaluating their relationship with United Airlines in light of recent events. "More importantly, look at this," Terrence added, showing Jasmine his screen. Other airlines' employees were coming forward with similar documentation of discriminatory practices. What had begun as an exposure of one airline's misdeeds was rapidly expanding into an industry-wide reckoning. Delta flight attendants are staging walkouts at 3 major hubs, Maya announced. They're demanding their company publicly commit to anti-discrimination policies before they'll return to work. Airport Director Hayes approached the protest line, his earlier authority replaced with something resembling desperation. "Dr. Washington, this situation has escalated beyond anyone's control. The governor is threatening to declare a state of emergency." "The situation is quite simple to resolve, Director Hayes," Jasmine replied calmly. "CEO Reynolds needs to acknowledge the systematic discrimination that occurs at his airline and commit to verifiable changes." "He's on his way," Hayes confirmed. "His helicopter will land in 5 minutes. But I need you to understand something. This airport cannot resume operations until this protest ends. Thousands of travelers are stranded, including medical personnel, family emergencies, time-sensitive cargo." "We understand the impact," Jasmine interrupted. "That's precisely why we chose this location. For years, discrimination has gone unaddressed because it was convenient to ignore it. Today, it's impossible to ignore." The distinctive thump-thump-thump of helicopter blades grew louder as Reynolds' aircraft approached. Media cameras tracked its descent to a designated landing area several hundred yards from the protest. Thomas Reynolds emerged wearing an immaculate suit despite the heat, flanked by security personnel and public relations staff. At 58, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone unaccustomed to having his authority questioned, he walked briskly toward the standoff. As he approached, Jasmine stepped forward to meet him, accompanied by Attorney Cooper. The dramatic confrontation, the CEO in his $1,000 suit facing the determined doctor still wearing the clothes she'd been forcibly removed in hours earlier, was captured by dozens of cameras. "Dr. Washington," Reynolds began, extending his hand. "I'm Thomas Reynolds. I understand you have concerns about your experience with our airline." Jasmine did not take his hand. "This isn't about my experience, Mr. Reynolds. This is about a pattern of discrimination that your company has practiced and concealed for years." Reynolds' practiced smile faltered slightly. "I assure you, United Airlines has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. If there have been isolated incidents of poor service, we're committed to addressing them." "Isolated incidents?" Jasmine echoed, her voice carrying across the tarmac. "Perhaps you should explain these." She nodded to Maya, who projected onto a portable screen the internal documents they had gathered, emails directing gate agents to limit demographic imbalance in premium cabins, security protocols that flagged passengers with culturally specific names, statistics showing dramatically higher rates of removal and denial of service for passengers of color. Reynolds' face reddened as he recognized authentic internal communications. He turned to his PR director, hissing, "Cut the live streams. Now." "It's too late for that," Cooper informed him. "This evidence is already circulating worldwide. The question is, how will you respond to it?" Reynolds attempted to regain control of the narrative. "I'm disappointed to see confidential business documents mischaracterized in this way. Context is important, and the context is clear," Jasmine interrupted. "Your airline systematically discriminates against passengers of color. You can acknowledge that reality and commit to changing it, or you can continue denying it while your company's reputation and stock price collapse." The assembled protesters, though reduced in number by the heat and the long hours, raised their voices in support. "No more lies. No more discrimination." Reynolds glanced at the terminal windows where thousands of delayed passengers watched the confrontation. He looked at the news helicopters circling overhead, the tactical police unit standing by, and the determined faces of the protesters who had shut down one of the world's busiest airports for principles they believed in. In that moment, Thomas Reynolds seemed to age years before the cameras. The calculation was visible on his face, the realization that there was no corporate strategy, no PR spin that could make this disappear. "What exactly do you want?" he asked finally. The Atlanta sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the tarmac where history was unfolding. CEO Thomas Reynolds stood face-to-face with Dr. Jasmine Washington, their confrontation broadcast to millions around the world. "What we want is simple," Jasmine stated, her voice steady despite hours of heat and exhaustion. "Acknowledgement of the systematic discrimination at your airline. An independent investigation with real authority. Transparent anti-discrimination policies with meaningful enforcement. And accountability for those who perpetuate racist practices." Reynolds glanced at his legal team, who shook their heads subtly. Admitting discrimination would open the company to massive liability. "Dr. Washington, while I respect your concerns, I cannot accept your characterization of our operations," Reynolds began carefully. "United Airlines has been an industry leader in diversity initiatives. Stop," Jasmine interrupted, her patience exhausted. "Those diversity initiatives didn't prevent your flight attendants from ignoring me while serving white passengers. They didn't stop your security from removing me when I asked for equal treatment. They didn't protect any of these people from similar experiences." She gestured to the protesters still holding their ground on the scorching tarmac. "Your carefully crafted statements mean nothing when your actions demonstrate the opposite. The world is watching, Mr. Reynolds. They've seen the evidence. They've heard the testimonies. The time for corporate doublespeak is over." The CEO's composure cracked slightly. "What would you have me say? That we systematically discriminate? That we target passengers based on race? Do you understand the legal implications of such admissions?" "I understand the human implications of your denials," Jasmine countered. "Every day you refuse to acknowledge this reality, more people suffer humiliation and dehumanization under your watch." Attorney Cooper stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds, the legal liability you fear is already unavoidable. The evidence is overwhelming. The question now is whether you'll be remembered as the CEO who fought against equality until the bitter end, or the one who had the courage to acknowledge failures and lead meaningful change. Reynolds turned to his PR director. What's the current situation? Sir, the hashtag has reached over 10 million engagements. Every major airline has issued statements distancing themselves from discriminatory practices. 3 of our largest corporate clients have suspended their contracts pending resolution. The board is concerned. The calculation was visible on Reynolds' face, the realization that the path of denial had become more costly than the path of acknowledgement. If I agree to your demands, he said slowly, will you clear the runway immediately? Once we have your signed commitment, Jasmine confirmed. Reynolds nodded to his legal team. Draft the statement. Include everything. The independent investigation, policy review, the whole package. As the lawyers huddled to prepare the document, Jasmine addressed the protesters. Stay strong. We're almost there. Darnell, who had stood beside her from the beginning, smiled despite his exhaustion. You actually did it. You made them listen. We did it, Jasmine corrected him. Every person who stood up, spoke out, or shared their story. This was never about just me. The drafting process took nearly an hour, with Cooper meticulously reviewing each clause to ensure the commitments were binding and verifiable. As the legal teams worked, medical personnel distributed water and basic first aid to the protesters who had endured hours in the heat. Finally, Cooper approached with the document. It's comprehensive. Independent investigation with public findings. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all staff. A passenger advocacy office with real authority. And perhaps most importantly, acknowledgement of past failures and a commitment to systemic change. Jasmine reviewed the agreement carefully before handing it to Reynolds. This is a beginning, not an end. We'll be watching to ensure these promises translate into action. Reynolds hesitated only briefly before signing. As the document was photocopied and distributed to all parties, the CEO stepped toward the assembled media. Today, United Airlines acknowledges that we have failed to provide equal treatment to all our passengers, he began, his words carrying across the tarmac and into living rooms worldwide. The evidence presented by Dr. Washington and others reveals practices that do not reflect our stated values. For that, I apologize unreservedly. A cheer erupted from the terminal windows where thousands of delayed passengers had been watching the confrontation unfold. Effective immediately, I am establishing an independent commission to investigate all aspects of our customer service and security protocols, with particular attention to racial disparities, Reynolds continued. The findings will be made public, and we commit to implementing all recommendations. As he outlined the specific commitments, Jasmine felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, exhaustion, and a cautious hope that real change might finally be possible. Is it enough? Zoe whispered beside her. It's more than anyone has achieved before, Jasmine replied. But the real work begins tomorrow, ensuring they follow through. When Reynolds concluded his statement, Jasmine addressed the protesters. We have secured a commitment to meaningful change. Now we fulfill our part of the agreement and clear the runway. The human chain that had held firm for hours finally dissolved, with protesters embracing each other in celebration and exhaustion. As they began moving toward the terminal, spontaneous applause broke out from airline workers and stranded passengers watching from the windows. Airport operations teams immediately began preparations to resume flights, though the backlog would take days to clear. News crews captured the historic moment as the protesters walked with heads held high, no longer trespassers but agents of transformation. 6 months later, Jasmine stood before a different crowd in a Washington, D.C. conference center. The nameplate on the podium read, Dr. Jasmine Washington, Chairperson, Federal Transportation Equity Commission. The Atlanta runway protest was not an isolated incident, she told the assembled aviation industry representatives. It was the inevitable result of decades of unchallenged discrimination. Today, I'm pleased to report that the changes implemented across major airlines have reduced complaints of discriminatory treatment by 68%. The commission she now led had been established by executive order in the wake of the protest, with authority to investigate and address equity issues across all transportation sectors. Many of her allies from that day on the tarmac now held positions of influence, Darnell directing airport staff training programs, Zoe leading flight attendant reforms, Terrence overseeing security protocol revisions. The runway revolution, as it had come to be known, had transformed not just United Airlines but the entire industry. Regular equity audits, transparent reporting of passenger demographics and treatment metrics, and swift consequences for discriminatory behavior had become standard practice. After her presentation, a young flight attendant approached Jasmine. "Dr. Washington, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been in this industry for 5 years, and the difference between then and now is night and day. Passengers are treated with dignity regardless of their appearance. Staff are empowered to report problems without fear of retaliation." She glanced around before adding quietly, "The day you stood on that runway, you stood for all of us who couldn't speak up. Thank you for your courage." As Jasmine boarded her flight home that evening, she noticed subtle but meaningful changes in the airline experience. The passenger manifest displayed only ticket numbers, not names that might trigger bias. The diverse flight crew moved through the cabin with equal attentiveness to all passengers. When she reached her seat in first class, no one questioned her presence or right to be there. The captain's voice came over the intercom as they prepared for takeoff. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. We're committed to ensuring every passenger receives equal respect and service throughout your journey with us. If you experience anything less, we want to know about it." Jasmine smiled to herself as she settled into her seat. One person's refusal to accept injustice had cascaded into industry-wide transformation. The system hadn't changed because those in power suddenly developed conscience. It changed because ordinary people found the courage to stand together and demand better. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Jasmine thought of all the travelers who would never know the humiliation she had experienced. Some victories weren't celebrated with parades or monuments, but with the simple dignity of being treated like a human being regardless of the color of your skin. Jasmine Washington's story reminds us that systemic change rarely comes from the top down, it begins when individuals refuse to accept injustice. One person's courage can ignite a movement that transforms entire industries. While institutions often maintain discriminatory practices until forced to change, the unified voices of everyday people remain the most powerful catalyst for justice. The runway revolution teaches us that documentation is crucial in fighting discrimination. Without evidence, systemic racism can be dismissed as isolated incidents. When patterns are exposed and made visible, denial becomes impossible. It also shows that meaningful change requires accountability mechanisms. Promises alone aren't enough without independent oversight and transparent reporting. Perhaps most importantly, this story demonstrates that solidarity multiplies impact. When Jasmine stood alone, she was vulnerable, but when others joined her cause, they became unstoppable. Real change happens when those with privilege recognize that injustice anywhere threatens justice everywhere, and choose to stand alongside those directly affected. What experiences with discrimination have you witnessed or faced while traveling? Have you ever stood up against injustice or wished you had? Share your story in the comments below. If this account of courage inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and transformation. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters. Thank you for being part of our community that believes in equality and justice for all. Together, we can create the change we wish to see in the world.